Wow, what a week. Good grief. My pending pile. Goodness gracious. My pending pile today, my goodness, it's the size of Jasmine Crockett. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger, where today it's gorgeous, beautiful day, nice fall day. A lot of the leaves have been changing. Nice and gorgeous and amazing. We can recognize as the climate begins to change out here. And the podcast today is going to be about social climate change. What does that mean? Well, it's not quite what we all know about climate change. We know what that's been about. But this is a climate change. And what's been amazing is people have said, how stupid are you for not being able to recognize climate change? And I would have to turn that around at this point and say the same thing to a lot of people who are being fired right now for things that were not acceptable a few weeks ago, or that were acceptable a few weeks ago, but are not acceptable today. How ridiculous can it be that you cannot recognize social climate change? The climate out there is completely different than it was 3 weeks ago, where you could absolutely step out and say whatever you wanted, not because of freedom of speech, but you could say the most harsh, awful things. Today, you don't get the ability to do that because of how scary things are right now at this point. There's been a societal change all of a sudden. And boy, I didn't actually watch the Charlie Kirk services yesterday, or the funeral, or all of the speakers that came out yesterday, that convention that basically got together for Charlie Kirk. I didn't get to see it. I did hear about it. I saw some of basically just a few of the excerpts of those who spoke. How many times the gospel was presented yesterday. If you missed Jesus in the middle of that, boy, you really missed it all. How much Christian morality, Judeo-Christian morality, was actually on display yesterday. That was an amazing thing to see that come out, and the celebration of those things, and then the polar shift all of a sudden to this direction. Now, I realize that some people would say that's just trending and trendy, and they accuse the whole transgender movement and the gay lesbian movement, all of that, as being the same. But the one thing that does come back around often is Christianity. And it does so, and thousands upon thousands of people do come to know Christ. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. But what I really want to talk about is the inability to recognize. So a lot of people are played off as stupid for not being able to recognize climate change coming from the side of the left. And to be honest with you, if you put the history into perspective and you begin to look at the quote-unquote science, I dare you to Google The Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore and take a look at that, and then how much of that ended up being false. Tons of it. So much so that Mr. Gore got sued over those issues and ended up having to pay a pretty penny for the exaggeration, the over-exaggeration of what were quote-unquote supposed to be facts that many were not. The climate change itself was built upon a major over-exaggeration and oftentimes just simply downright lies. So for those of you that are looking at your solar panels and all of your wind turbines that are out there, all of that was built on lies and ended up being that. So I won't go into that. We've talked about climate change quite a bit, but the climate has definitely changed. And it's changed not just with not just with Republicans and conservatives, but also with Democrats. And I was really shocked to see Jamie Lee Curtis make a statement. And so she's being interviewed. I'm trying to get her quote. And she says this. She said, I mean, I disagreed with him on almost every point that I ever heard him say. And then she began to cry. And then she says this. Now, this is amazing. Watch this. She says, but I do believe that he was a man of faith. And I hope that in the moment when he died, that he felt connected to his faith. Even though I find his ideas were abhorrent to me, I still believe that he was a father, a husband, and a man of faith. And I hope that whatever connection to God actually means, that he felt it. You know, it's interesting. I look at this, and she stops here in this moment and says, whatever actually connection to God means, that means nobody's ever really sat down and explained to Jamie Lee Curtis what connection to God really is. And then at the death of Charlie Kirk, she's cut to the heart. And she actually opens up this dialogue, being asked about what happened. She says, this truly is a man of faith. And then she says, in whatever connection to God, whatever that truly means, I hope that he was there. It opened up a dialogue, and it did so on so many different levels. It opened up the dialogue, the record numbers of people who have come to Christ. And it was said yesterday about the fact that there's been a great revival in this nation. I would go as far as to say there's been a great awakening. And suddenly what happened is social climate change took a quick leap in the opposite direction of where it was. So much so that certain things are not tolerated. And part of that, folks, I think part of the social climate change that is going on, and the reason why it's changed, is because there's been a longing for it to change. And today we're seeing a younger generation, but now the younger generation that is turning in the direction that they're turning and saying, you know, I think I do want a spouse. I think I do want children. I think I do want that. I do want to find genuine, true love. And there's a reason. And I think we've missed this reason. And I do see this often. I see this very often, as a matter of fact. I see the fact that I watch these children, and some of them are now between 9, say, and 15 years old. Maybe 9 to 15 years old. Yeah. And I'll have these conversations with kids that are like 9 to 15 years old. And as I'm having these conversations, I'm talking to them. They're asking questions that well-mature adults never ask. It blows my mind to talk to a 9-year-old and being in conversation with a 9-year-old who's saying, yeah, I get home from school every day. I make sure that I get my homework done, but I'm also putting on dinner and making sure that that's ready for me and my siblings and all of this. And they're talking just like a normal person. I mean, like a normal, except for with a maturity level that blows my mind for 9 to 15-year-olds. And then I meet the parents. And it blows my mind often because I'll meet a parent. And after I've been done talking to a 9-year-old who says, you know, I do understand. And in their response, they'll say, I do understand there are things I've done wrong. I don't want to be known for that. I run into 12-year-olds who are literally planning out their future and have a goal for their future. Yes, I think I'd like to have a family. I run into people when I talk about what it's like to actually do have a family and a great relationship with your spouse, that they're in tears and they hope to find someone. Just recently, I had a young girl at 15 years old walk away and say, you know, I really hope that when I find that person for me, that they love me. In tears. They're hoping to find this love. Why? Why is all of this happening? Why is there this climate change that's taking place? Because now we've been a couple of generations now where the parents are like forever adolescents or younger. Forever adolescents is what I'm seeing today. So I'll talk to a 9-year-old kid, to a 15-year-old kid, and they're very intellectual. They're very down. I mean, they've got these key questions about future, and they want to talk about actually having a good life. And then they want to start a life with Jesus, and they stop and they say, I know I've done these things wrong. I need Christ to forgive me of my sins. And they actually state it just like that. I'm not saying this because in this kind of context, because of the fact that they use it childlike lingo with me. They're using that kind of lingo. I need Christ to forgive me of my sins because I know I've done wrong. And everything I've ever done wrong, I need to have it forgiven from today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And they want to accept Christ. They go follow up. They want to go through baptism. It's amazing to me. And they're doing this because they want to start this good life. They want to trust in Christ. And they want to live their life, and it blows my mind. They want to live their life morally correct, morally right. And then I meet their parents. Blows my mind. I meet their parents, and their parents are like, "Yeah, dude, how's it going? Good to see you, man. Like, yeah, I'm really like, it's really cool that my kids have made this decision and stuff." And so, and I talk to their parents who are forever adolescents. I'm not kidding you, man. We're talking 38 to 42 years old. "Yeah, dude, what's up?" Throw up the little devil horn sign and hang out your tongue. I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? And what I'm finding is these children that are coming up, they want a life that's better than they had. They want a life. They look at their parents and they're thinking, oh my gosh, where did you come from today? And there's a polar shift. And I'm watching these kids that aren't into gaming that are like, I don't want to be into that because I see what it's done to my parents, and I don't want. And I see this, and suddenly there is something that is taken. Do you remember the old American Express ad years ago? Membership has its privileges. Remember that? American Express membership has its privileges. That was a great marketing campaign. But I think one of the things that children and youth of today, children and students that are growing before they get into college are understanding is that morality has its privileges. And here's what's happening in this. Morality has its privileges because when morality comes around, they're recognizing a few things that's finally come to sort of pass and understand. That with morality comes these great things. And there's been this development, this sudden social climate change that's taken place, is this development that people aren't talking about. And that is that morality does have its privileges. For instance, with morality, a jail time usually doesn't come. A prison sentence doesn't come. With morality, lawsuits don't come, usually. At least not because you've done something wrong. With morality, usually, be honest with you, better credit. By the way, your credit score is affected if you've been arrested oftentimes. So, I mean, this is something that is going. With morality comes these amazing privileges. With morality comes a life that's not built on selfishness, but with morality comes a life that is built on the fact that I'm making life better, not just for me, but for everyone else around me. With morality comes privileges, benefits. And this is important. And it's ringing home with young children. It's ringing home with teenagers. And it's screaming volumes. Because they're looking at who came before them and they're recognizing, wait just a second here. I've been raised by either another family member other than my parents, or I'm discarded on a regular basis so that my parents can go off and live what they think to be their best life, whatever it is, which usually involves some sort of immorality or some sort of something that's going to cost them greatly, whether it's some sort of addiction or some sort of whatever. In the process, as the parents go off and live totally for themselves, that's not the better life for the kid. And unfortunately, the children are having to pay the consequences. And as they are becoming children and older and have these responsibilities, they're saying, I will never do this to my kids. Period. And there's a sudden social climate change, which is why Charlie Kirk getting up to speak spoke a voice of a generation that's coming at 31 years old, speaks a voice, and actually back a number of years ago, I think in his earlier 20s, speaking as lead off for the Republican National Convention, is speaking this life of morality and faith in Christ. And that's where it all begins. And it's important. And probably the greatest benefit of living a life in morality, where morality has its privileges, is the fact that you have the ability to see truth, because you're not drug away by some unnatural desire that is completely blinding and leads to a state of depravity where you pick up the tools to do awful things that will cost you your life. I don't think anyone figured on that. Meanwhile, while everyone's screaming at you from a liberal side telling you should recognize climate change, that the liberals cannot recognize social climate change as it's taking place. And they're trying to bring about a social climate change in the opposite direction that has nothing to do with reality. And that the current social climate change now has everything steeped in Judeo-Christian morality and ethics. And as a result of that, it's become really the saving grace of the next generation, and also the saving grace, and always has been, of this nation. It's important. That's my opening. Boy, I get to my seriousness right up front on all of this. But in my pending pile, we continue to go in my pending. So what is it that we're unable to recognize as it comes? I can go all the way back and at the beginning. So I looked at that. I looked at Jamie Lee Curtis, and I stopped there, and it opened up a door there that basically said, wait a minute, there is some sort of connection, and she's recognizing basically at this point, it looks like some sort of connection has taken place. Now, if someone would sit down with Jamie Lee Curtis and just say, yeah, that connection was with Jesus, and you can find that connection with God. And it might just be that she has the ears to actually hear that, even though she says, I disagree with. Of course, there's a disagreement because the heart has not changed. But with the entrance of Jesus into the heart, that changes everything. Following up, literally right after that interview, you see last week that Jimmy Kimmel is dismissed. I had that conversation. Kimmel just wasn't funny. He just wasn't. As I talked about Saturday Night Live last week, literally the skits literally have become, I'm not kidding, the skits of Saturday Night Live that they used to literally poke fun at the front of the show, the cold openings that they did of that show. I'm not joking. There's some of the statements that Jasmine Crockett makes. As soon as she gets done making that statement, I expect her to look at the camera. Literally, I expect her. Is this a joke? I expect her to look at the camera and go, live from New York, it's Saturday night. Because I honestly believe for her that if she ever decided to lose politics, she has a career on Saturday Night Live and she doesn't even need writers. She just needs to be herself. We'll get into more of that in a minute. Jimmy Kimmel was one who could not recognize the social climate change. And so as a result, he kept on with the rhetoric that he had been spewing out for quite some time. And then he found out real quick. And by the way, I know that Trump and all of his people get the blame for this. But when your advertisers pull the plug and your people threaten to boycott, they don't want to watch anymore and they don't want to see it anymore. At that point, you self-implode. And that's exactly what happened. Kimmel was unable to see, and so many others have been unable to see, that a societal climate change, a social climate change has actually taken place. And that the climate is no longer what it was 3 weeks ago. And for the reason being is that for a long time, people have put up with it. But when an assassination occurred, there's no longer any putting up with it because now a life has been taken. And in that, we see America pour out at the core of who she truly is. Not just maybe who she truly, listen to me, it's not just who she already truly was. But then others have discovered, this is what is amazing to me, others have discovered that what America once was is who they truly want to be as well. And they are finding Jesus, and they are finding that those Judeo-Christian ethics and that morality again. And they're standing together as a nation. And they are overjoyed at the fact that that's what they can celebrate. And that's what's happening currently. And anyone who's not involved in that, and they look and they point at Trump and they blame Trump, say it's all Trump's fault. You know, he's the one that called for the firing and all. He had nothing to do with it. And it's proven that he had nothing to do with it. Your advertisers and your people and your advertisers are listening to the public. That's that societal climate change that's social climate change that has taken place. Have said, we're not going to watch this. And then even, you know, your affiliate stations have said, I'm not broadcasting this anymore. Now, let me also say this at the same time. So we're looking at this take place. This is a societal change that is moving more toward Judeo-Christian ethics and morals. It's huge. It's a big change. Now, and it's Disney who actually says, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to let you go. Now, don't get me wrong. I also see at the same time that it's not making money. So most likely, matter of fact, it looks like they had a staffer come out, according to Fox News yesterday. They had a staffer that came out and said, no, they'll probably buy his contract out. I don't see any way that his show will even continue because there's not really too many people interested in watching it because of what it had become. So, with all of that, comes another narrative, and another narrative trying to sort of offset this whole thing. And then last week, you see Montel Williams come on, and Montel Williams comes on, and he begins to talk about how tormented this boy was. He laid on that roof for 30 minutes trying to make a decision, and it wasn't until the transgender thing was mentioned that he actually finally went through with what he thought he was climbing up there. And obviously in that, it's a new, by the way, this narrative coming out there, as that's coming out, he's being interviewed actually, as he's being interviewed on CNN. There's that liberal narrative that's coming out. That poor boy in his torment. Hold on. That poor boy in his torment, let me explain. From the point where you see him trying to shuffle himself up on the roof, by the way, from the point where his feet actually disappear off the edge of the roof as he's climbing onto the top, to the point that you hear the shot go off, it's 7 minutes. 7 minutes, about as long as Hey Jude by the Beatles. Literally, I'm not kidding. And the time it would take you to sing Hey Jude, that's the time he pulled off the shot. That's the time to get on the roof and to slowly crawl into the place that you're wanting to crawl to, and then to pull out everything you need to do the deed, get it all set in place, and do 7 minutes. That's not a lot of time, by the way. Let me explain. It isn't. So what that does prove is that the reason why you got on that roof was to do that specifically. There wasn't a 30-minute period of torment on that roof. You got up there to do that job. And by the way, I'm not coming up with those figures off the top of my head. That's the timestamp on the video. 7 minutes from the point that his feet disappear off the edge of that roof to the point that the shot rings out. But they're trying to play that he's just this lover. In all of this, ABC has a guy that comes on, and he's talking about, oh, we were in there and we listened to such romantic posts from this man to his lover on these texts that he sent. You got to be kidding me. The only reason why they're even pushing that is because it is the transgender thing that's coming on that. Y'all, listen, nobody glorified the letters of John Hinckley Jr. when he shot President Reagan, all those love letters that he sent to Jodie Foster. No one. No one called him this wonderful, romantic, whatever. It had nothing to do with any of that, and neither does this either. And so, by the way, he does come back and apologize, that commentator. He comes back to apologize for the words that he spoke, again, all because of social climate change that's taken place. because it wasn't real popular to hear him glorify the romance in that transgender relationship. So, that being the climate that we're in that has suddenly changed, don't get me wrong, because I know you hear me mention Fox News often, but it brings me to Gutfeld for a minute. Greg Gutfeld, who has a show on at night, late night. Greg Gutfeld, that if you go to his website today, claims he is now the king of late night. He's coining Johnny Carson's phrase, who definitely was the king of late night for 30 some odd years, a long time. So to jump up in the arrogance and the pride to call yourself the king of late night, I would have to agree, by the way. You won't find me do this often, but you'll find me agreeing with both CNN and MSNBC, saying Gutfeld is simply not funny. It's not. And I've tried this. I've tried to watch a few times, but the vulgarity is so incredibly bad that is coming off of Greg Gutfeld's show that it's and if you'll notice that in the opening monologues, that the response does become laughter, but not before the sound of whoa by the crowd, because they are shocked into believing that he actually read that joke on air. Because most of the jokes that I've discovered that are in Greg Gutfeld's repertoire from the very beginning in his monologues all have to do with male and female private anatomy and body cavities. That's it. Over. It's like we write these jokes and we use these current common whatever's going on to write these jokes to get our digs in about male and female private anatomy and body cavities. By the way, I don't want to see that. I don't need to see the vulgarity. Vulgarity, Johnny Carson didn't have to use vulgarity to be funny in the day, yet he was, and you can still go back and look at a lot of those videos and still roll in laughter. But Gutfeld, the self-proclaimed agnostic atheist, that's what he calls himself. And that is someone who does not believe that a God even exists. Nothing in the universe even exists like that. Is feeding that pride too. And he's also a man that I'm telling you today probably should be recognizing this social climate change. Because that same vulgarity that he is using is going to turn against him if he continues to do it. Guaranteed. I've tried. I tried to watch. And even actually 2 nights ago, I turned it on and this is terrible. And what makes it even worse is it's followed up with, I didn't write these. This is what he says often. If you'll watch his show every night, I didn't write this. But he's reading it off. So he's got a team of writers that are writing this vulgarity in every single night. Why? Somebody needs to deal with that team and tell them that social climate change has taken place now. You might want to put that behind you. Just saying. At the core of the Christian faith I beseech you, brethren, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your reasonable act of service. And he goes on to say to abstain from fleshly lusts and sexual immorality and a number of different things. He talks about behavior. Paul warns about, coarse language and filthy talk and all of that too. And I know you can look at me and say, well, goodness gracious, it's 2025. I get it. I understand. I'm just telling you, it is 2025. But Nate Bargatze is a guy who can prove to you that vulgarity is not necessary in comedy, and you can still be funny. Just saying. If Greg Gutfeld is the king of late night comedy, we have stooped to all kinds of new lows. No, I'd say the queen of comedy right now, honestly, the queen of comedy today would be Jasmine Crockett. I would, seriously. This last week has been great. Killer sound bites there. Killer phrases here. Like, a person that commits a crime doesn't make them a criminal. When a person commits a crime, that doesn't make them a criminal. The actual definition, ladies and gentlemen, of a criminal is one who has committed a crime. gosh, that's just amazing. After the statements she's made literally in the last month on a daily basis, it's like they turn the camera on. I don't get it. They turn the camera on and she just talks off the top of her head. And the statements that she makes when she talks off the top of her head, those fake eyelashes just batting away, and with all of the mascara and the makeup, she got more money in mascara and makeup, fake eyelashes, and fingernails than you and I do have in our house payment on a monthly basis. It's amazing. And the thought hit my mind as I watched her on these last comments. I thought, the Democratic Party actually has a Tammy Faye Baker of their own. It's amazing. And her name is Jasmine Crockett. That's exactly what is taking place right this second. Just let her on out there. Keep her going. I'm thinking maybe she's doing this on purpose because she knows if she keeps it up and keeps on making these nothing burger statements and these comments like that she'll become the vice president of the United States for the next Democratic person. I'm guessing. And this is a woman who pulls the race card on a regular basis. It's all racist. It's all racist. Even the last, she slams according to Fox, she slams White House lawmakers or Jasmine Crockett slams white lawmakers who voted to honor Charlie Kirk. And she says because Charlie Kirk's message was all racist. There wasn't a single thing that Charlie Kirk ever said that was racist. She has no idea what she's talking about. She's just anxious to pull that card. And then she's hurt because only 2 Caucasians voted with her. Can I ask you a question? When it comes to the Democratic Party, it blows my mind. When it comes to the Democratic Party, if you're white, you're not supposed to see color. But if you're black, you're ostracized if you don't recognize color. You get it. Blows my mind. And the more she opens her mouth, the more every single day, please give her more airtime. Please. I promise. Please give her more. By the end of the month, I ought to be able to have 25 things I could line up in a montage that would be absolutely awesome. And you talk about bring down the house in laughter, she will do it. So I tell you, my pending pile is the size of Jasmine Crockett today. Because she's loaded. She got more articles in my pending pile than anyone else does. With the societal change, by the way, the social climate change, all of that's going on. For those who can't recognize that climate change, that the climate has completely changed since Charlie Kirk was shot, it's going to cost them greatly. And it's really coming from the same party that tells us they were idiots for not being able to recognize what they considered to be scientific climate change out there. But those who are unable to recognize the societal climate change that's happening right now, it's costing them greatly. And it's going to continue to do so, I do believe. And I know for us, we look at it and say, wait a minute, why is this? Why all this violence? Why all this violence for free speech? That's because when people honestly move to depravity, and I mean this with all my heart, when they move to the biblical, there is a biblical definition of depravity, which is found in Romans chapter 1. I don't have to read it for you. You can go there, and it goes all the way into the details of when men are inflamed with a lust for men and women exchange, they get rid of the natural use of their body, and they begin to chase after the same flesh or foreign flesh or whatever. It goes into all the details of that depravity and the extreme that it actually does go to. And where did that idea come from? Where did we see that actually first take place? And by the way, there is a biblical account for those of you that miss it. There's a biblical account. And we find this biblical account in the city of Sodom, where there's one man at the gate, and his name is Lot. And he is receiving 2 men that are coming in that are about to destroy Sodom with fire and brimstone. We pick up the story with Lot sitting at the gate of Sodom, and he gets up and he's going to go and he's going to meet them. And he bows himself toward them with his face to the ground, and he says, here, don't go into the city. They're wanting to go, they say, we're going to go into the town square. We'll spend the night in the open square. And one of the things that Lot recognizes in his day is you don't want to be spending the night in an open square where there's a city as evil as this one that's being described in Sodom. And very quickly, you're about to see the danger that's here because of the depravity that has come to the minds of human beings. But he insists that they go with him, and so they do. They follow him to the house. And before they lay down for the night, just as basically the sun has gone down and darkness has come upon the land, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, and then it says this, all of the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called in to Lot and they said, "Where are those men who came with you tonight? Bring them out so that we may know them carnally." They're going to take these men and they're going to drag them out of their house and they're going to force themselves upon these men. That's how brutal this is going to be. And Lot goes outside through the doorway and he says, and shuts the door behind him. And he says, "Please, please don't behave so wicked." He's begging them. By the way, Lot going out the door puts his life on the line, and he knows it. He lays his life on the line to protect that which is pure and innocent, which is in his house. And then he says, "I've got 2 daughters, have never known a man. Please, please let me bring them out to you instead." By the way, Lot offers up his daughters. They don't want to have anything to do with the daughters. They've gone that far as depraved. And Lot is aware of that. He's trying to make a sacrifice as he puts his daughters out there. "Please do not do this." And even the ability to throw his daughters out there and say, "Look, I've got daughters here. It doesn't need to be men on men here. I got daughters." "Do nothing to these men, I beg of you," is what he's saying. "They came under my protection of my roof." And the men kept on, and then they finally said, "Stand back." And they looked up and they said, "Look at this one who keeps acting like a judge, and we're going to deal worse with you than we would with them." They threaten his life. That's exactly what they're doing right here. You don't let us in there, and we're going to get so violent and deal with you in a way. This is, by the way, we're in Genesis here. Genesis chapter 19. And then they pressed hard against the man Lot. So hard that they intend to break the door down. They're going to use Lot as a battering ram. Do you hear me? They're going to lift up Lot, basically, take Lot and use him as a battering ram to break in the door to get to these men, because their desire is that far out of control. It's brought them to a depraved mind that they will rise up and now do violence and kill whoever they have to get what they want. That's where depravity leads to. It starts off basically right here in Genesis, by the way. It's one of the reasons why God sent the flood, believe it or not, because men were depraved in the day. But when we look at here, this city of Sodom, the whole reason why those men are there is because there's been a cry out against them, which means that in the city, this evil has been acted upon against the innocent for some time, and their innocence God is hearing. They're crying out to God, praying to God, crying to God, because they are being violated on every single level and probably killed on every single level as they cry out to God to rescue them. And there's a cry out against this city in the prayers of those who are being prayed upon toward God. Please, please stop this. This is what this cry is about. And so God, we see Abraham before this actually praying or talking to God and saying, "Look, you're going to destroy this city? Come on now, wait a minute. Give them an opportunity." And they finally sort of get into, it's like a negotiating process if you want to get down to it. But it's the fact that his prayers actually do matter. Listen to me, it's important. His nephew is Lot. Abraham's nephew is Lot, who's gone into this city. And Lot is praying for his nephew, but he's also praying that his nephew has made some influence. If there are 50 that are righteous, if you find we cannot destroy the city, I won't do it for the sake of 50. Please, I got no right to ask this. What about 40? What about 35? He keeps on honing it down. And there's a hope that maybe Lot in his righteousness would have changed some of the people. What about 10? I won't destroy the city for the sake of 10. And at this point, it gets down to the fact that Abraham is just hoping that maybe Lot has had some influence on his own family. And that maybe in that influence, that his righteousness and the influence of his righteousness would save him and his family. So God sends these men into Sodom, angels into Sodom, basically, to rescue him. And they come with a warning. And the men say to Lot, basically, when they are trying to use Lot as the battering ram to break down the door, the angels basically, they strike him with blindness. They strike them with blindness, not Lot, but them. Everyone who's guilty and who's going to be involved in this crime, they hit with blindness. See, here's the thing about a depraved mind. Eventually, God gives them over so that they cannot see. They're blind completely. That's one of the reasons why they're struck here. When they go to an ultimate extreme, they're completely blind. They no longer have any grip on morality. There'll no longer be any change of that in their life at this point because they have given themselves over to their own personal desire, and anything that has had to do with God or his morality or anything that has to do with him at all is now gone. So he gives them over. He strikes them with blindness, and he did. Both small and great, he struck them with blindness. They could not find the door. Listen to me. This is important. They couldn't find the door into the righteous man's house. They couldn't find the door into the righteous man's house. And we think, well, maybe that's so that it can protect him and his family. No, see, the thing about it is, listen to me carefully. They're struck blind so that they'll never see righteousness again. They'll never get a glimpse of it. They'll never see it. See, the reality is, the bottom line, when it comes down to it, morality and righteousness does have its privileges. And when you have people that are actually moral and they are righteous, that are within your life, they live by the ways of the Lord and the Bible, you actually do get to experience and see what righteousness truly does look like. And the righteousness and the power of Jesus, until finally you are blinded at one point when God has finally given you over to a depraved mind. Then you're blinded. And you'll never see righteousness for what it is ever again. That's exactly what happened here. And then the men said to Lot, you got anyone else here? Son-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone, whoever you have in this city, take them out of this place. We're going to destroy this place because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord. And the Lord sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and he spoke to his sons-in-law who'd married his daughter. And he said, get up, go out of this place. And they thought it was a joke. They laughed at him. The idea of this is really that they just scoffed at him. Come on, you crazy old man. Look at this city and all these who are in this city. Look at what they're able to do. Why would we take your word where righteousness has no credibility to the sons-in-law? They take it as joking and they scoff at Lot. And when the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry. Now, I want you to just note these verses, which are very important. He says, arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed of the punishment of this city. And while he lingered, he took hold of his wife. Now, look, he says this. He tells them, escape for your life, and do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. There are parts to this that are important that you understand, and they are specific. Watch this. He says, escape. He says, don't look back. And don't stay anywhere in the plain. Don't be anywhere near the city. Matter of fact, get out. Come out from amongst them, basically, is what he's saying. Get out from amongst them so that no part of this influence, anything is going to create your destruction. And don't look back. Unfortunately, what happens on the trip is, the wife, gosh, She just is going to take a peek back. Let me just take a peek back. And she does not listen to the specific details of the word that is sent to them by God. And because she decides to just listen to a part of it, she turns around. And it says she's instantly turned into a pillar of salt, literally killed right there, because she refused to listen to the word that was given to them. See, this is what happens when you take parts of the word. You say, I'll take these parts, but I won't keep these. It doesn't work that way. God's laid out, he's laid out his word. He's laid out the ways to live by. He's laid out what he means by. He's laid out the ways that you get to heaven. There's only one way. He's laid out all of that. And it's specific. And by the way, I didn't write the book. And it's not my place to come and actually step up and sort of take parts of the book and make you feel better about yourself if you only behave in a certain way. I promise you, that's one of the reasons why in Romans chapter 1, that he basically has given them over to a depraved mind, and that the punishment's coming to them, not just to them, but also those who also approve. The approval is those who look up and go, it's okay, baby. It'll be just fine. You can live your life whatever you want, as long as you can say that you have Jesus. You can pull those pages on out of your Bible, and it'll be okay. No. It will not. You don't violate the specific word of God without there being serious consequences. That's why at the end of it, he says, not only those who practice these things, but also those who give their approval to them. Paul said, because we know the terror of the Lord. We know how detail-oriented God really is. And we know the terror that falls upon men when they violate his word, or they choose to stay in their sins, basically. We persuade men. That's a compassionate heart. That's what Charlie Kirk did. It's what we do. It's what Lot did when he stood at the city and said, please, don't just come out of there. Come to my house. Please stay under my roof. You'll be under my protection. It's what Lot did when the men grabbed a hold of him and were going to use him for a battering ram to break down the door. He was protecting that, which was precious. He was protecting that which was taught to him by Abraham. That's the same thing that our nation was built upon. And it's the same spirit that we're called to protect by as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we should stand at the gate. We should. We should stop. We should literally invite men to come through the door of our church houses and our homes and to talk to them about Jesus and to help them escape the things that are going on out there that are in this world, because there is a deep darkness that is out there right at this very present moment. But there is a light that is far brighter than that darkness that overcomes it. And his name is Jesus. And for those that know him, they have that light, that Spirit of God within them. And so can you. And if you do, that is our call. Yes, social climate change has taken place, but it's no different. Social climate change actually took place the day that Jesus came onto the scene. Social climate change continued to take place. It cost the life of Jesus when he hung on the cross. Why 3,000 Jews came to know Jesus Christ. 3,000 men came to know Jesus Christ on the day of Pentecost. And thousands more would come to know him as well. There was a social climate change that took place and still does today. You've been listening to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. What does all this mean? Well, it means if you don't know Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord, that's the beginning of the start of living a great life, really. To be forgiven of your sins so that they no longer have dominion over you. That's an amazing thing. Remission means that literally the chains fall off and no longer have remission. I mean, no longer have power or dominion over you. That you actually can have victory over the things that are going on in your life if you will surrender them to Christ and your life to Christ. Victory is there. And the ability to walk in a life that is really amazing is good. No matter where you've been, no matter what the record of your history is, before Christ, it can be forgiven. Finally, in all of this, you don't know Jesus. You can come to him. You can just stop where you are and say, listen, Lord, I need you. And you could come and say, please come into my life. Forgive me of all of my sins. Those things I've done yesterday, the things I'll be guilty of today, and the things that happen tomorrow. Please forgive me of those sins and help me to walk in your ways. You know what the side effect of coming to Jesus should be? A pretty good moral life. You ought to be compelled to actually walk in that direction because the Spirit of God is changing you to walk in his ways. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, I encourage you. Stand strong. Stay the course. Keep walking forward. You are a light to your community, a light to your family, and you are hope for the future because within you is the power of the Spirit of God who speaks truth and stands for that. Be a champion for truth. Be a person who lives a morally great life. Be a light to your friends and your family, to your coworkers, even to your enemies, and even in those you haven't met yet. And that's my encouragement for the day. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great day, folks.